The topic of this session is dementia care and COVID-19, and we'll broadly be addressing two topics. The first is how a clinical institution and patient organisation have adapted their care and service provision during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the second main theme is how COVID-19 has affected people with dementia, from ethnic minority groups and also their caregivers, family caregivers, and also more formal caregivers. In this session, we have four speakers. We have Mercè, Boada, Nicola Cooper, Carolien, Smits, and Bernadette Rock. I'd like to welcome you all. And the first person to speak will be Mercè Boada. I will let her give a very brief introduction to herself, and then the Zoom moderator will start her video recording for the presentation. Okay. Welcome, Mercè. Over to you.
Thank you. Welcome everybody. And it's a pleasure for me to share this panel with my friends and with Angela Bradshaw from Alzheimer Europe, and to share with you our experience about COVID. I am neurology by background and CEO of Fundació ACE. My position in Fundació ACE is medical director, and I want to share with you this experience because it's a very hard experience, but COVID illustrates us with a lot of new ways to affront or to face patients with Alzheimer's disease in very critical period. Go ahead, please. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure for me to be here as a part of Alzheimer Europe. Thanks for allowing me the opportunity to share with you our experience during the COVID pandemic. I want to focus my talk in the state of alarm period. What did we do? What did we do when the public system collapsed? Our main objective was to ensure the continuity of our clinical care in all our departments. The key point was safety for professionals and patients, and in turn, the safety for their surrounding social circles. What we did, all the measures and the actions we did have to be adapted in the three different periods, as you can see in the next slide. The pre-COVID confinement, and in the week 11, we stopped all the face-to-face activities during the state of alarm and the post-COVID confinement, when progressively we restart the face-to-face activities. I would like to go over our action plans in a little more detail in the next few minutes. Our action plans during the COVID-19 was focused in reorganizing our institution, following the institutional ethics, the government guidelines, and to accommodate our care model, to planning the professional and safety plans, to facilities and space reorganization, opening the telematic protocols and programming and schedule our new activities. At the end, execution and monitoring. Execution measures for identify and testing COVID-19, create safety circuits, implement telemedicine and teleneuropsychology, and monitoring all the news activities and the quality of control. Keep our quality control. As a summary, as our key actions, I would like to highlight safety measures, like ensure the safety of professionals and patients to reduce the risk of infection, to preserve and maintain quality of our clinical practice, and following the new model of work, to incorporate, consolidate, and maintain telework medicine, and finally, in the post-COVID plan innovation to establish a blended criteria of face-to-face telemedicine to adapt the logistic within and across our department and to adapt our action plan according to the deconfinement period. Government guidelines. It was a bit exhausting, but very rewarding. If you are interested in getting more information, you can look these papers related to memory unit, clinical trials unit, and research unit during the COVID period. Allows me to move on the common and some facts and figures regarding the memory units and the clinical trials. In this big picture that shows our clinical during the war period, all our activity was stopped in the week 11 when the state of alarm took place. Within the next 3 or 4 weeks, we restarted our activity based on telemedicine, as you can see. In this slide, we can compare the planned face-to-face activity and the TMA, the telematic medical activity, from March to June. We could only do 30% of our activity related to the diagnosis process and 71 for follow-up appointments and unscheduled appointments increasing to 112%. Let me point out the meaning of non-scheduled appointment, as it is maybe a novel concept. They are an unforeseen appointments by phone or by mail or email answered by our team on the spot. Concerning clinical trials, in this slide, you can see the big picture of our activity immediately before the COVID pandemic. We have ongoing 16 clinical trials with 130 patients included. The majority of the cities are anti-amyloid or anti-tau. It was difficult here was managing the logistic of 75% of the drug administration taking place in our facilities. It turned out to the big effort in terms of logistic. In this slide, you can see the big picture of our activity in the different perspective. You can see the comparison of our weekly activity immediately before and post-COVID. All our activities stop in the week 11 when the state alarm started, of course. The orange columns represent the face-to-face activity, and in blue we have the calls to keep in contact with the patients until we could restart our normal activity. How did maximize and add value taking patients and giving support? Through calls, the proactivity calls. The proactivity calls is focused on to give patients and families support and continue contact with them. We designed a phone call form to collect health information related to the COVID pandemic on time. Through these proactivity calls made by our professionals, we were able to maintain their trust in us. This proactivity is a big part of our success during the pandemic. The calls talk about 10 to 30 minutes each one, more in the social workers' calls. I am going finishing to talking about what we have learned and can we recommend during this critical period? First of all, we should be prepared to minimize the disruption caused by the COVID and other emerging situations. Secondly, we have been able to come up with ad hoc plans to cope with such critical situations in order to maintain clinical assistance and clinical research. Also, we cannot afford to discontinue clinical trials, nor to affect the validity of the results. I would like to focus on the clinical trial in my last slide. Inclusion of diagnostic testing for COVID should be implemented as a safety assessment for the participants of clinical trials. Clinical trials assessment should be designed using telemedicine, of course, now, and some safety procedures should be performed using remote monitoring devices. My last point is addressed to the sponsors and CROs. Sponsor and CRO should establish a more fluent and agile communication with clinical investigators as a key to successfully managing future emerging situations like COVID, and create ad hoc crisis committees with local clinical investigators to discuss and to make timely decisions. Love in times of COVID, because everything we do is never too much. We owe it to the victims of this terrible pandemic. I would like to thank all the FACE team, the Fundació ACE team, for managing the COVID crisis with courage and enthusiasm. Thank you very much for attending this session.
Many thanks, Mercè, there for a very stirring finishing comment to your video. We'll take questions at the end of the session, so please, if you do have any questions for Mercè, write them in the chat box, unless there is a burning question right now, in which case please feel free to speak up. In the meantime, I'd like to introduce Carolien Smits, who will be speaking live in the next presentation. She's a senior researcher and strategic advisor at Pharos, which is a Dutch Centre of Expertise in Health Disparities. Her work there focuses on older migrants, dementia, family carers, and COVID-19. And in her talk, she'll be providing some insights into the COVID-19 experiences of family caregivers of people with dementia from minority ethnic groups. Carolien, a very warm welcome to this session. If I could invite you to unmute yourself, come on video if you want, and the moderator will display your slides in the video now. Carolien, over to you.
Thank you very much.
I think, Carolien, I think, are you maybe on sound for your video as well?
Thank you, Angela, and all the participants who were able to delay their dinner for this last session. It's a great opportunity to be able to discuss our findings of our small yet in-depth study on the impact of COVID on migrant carers. All right. Can I have the next slide, please? So just to a quick recap, the first wave of COVID in the Netherlands, with hindsight, we had more infections in migrant communities. And at the same time, the first wave in the Netherlands could be characterized with a lack of knowledge, a lack of also of safety measures, face masks, gloves, testing, facilitation. It was all too little and too late, both in the community and certainly also in the nursing homes. So there were many infections and deaths in the Dutch nursing homes. And by the middle of March, the government issued physical distancing and also issued limitations, well, virtually blocking nursing home visits. And the next. So the study was actually looking at the impact of those measures, and we were part of a larger study that was led by the University of Amsterdam, and our sub-study focused on migrant family carers, and we were able to issue some recommendation to the National Outbreak Management Team. So I think the government did something with our findings. And it was all published in some international publication already, and also at coronatijden.nl. So the next, please. What did we do to study the experience of migrant family carers? We interviewed 5 family carers with a migration background: Turkish, Moroccan, Moluccan, Indonesian, and they all had a person with dementia living at home, in the community, or in the nursing homes. And we spoke to children and the hospital and the husband of the person with dementia. And we did this with repeated, semi-structured telephone interviews. And we got to learn those people really well over time. So we had 4 to 9 interviews per respondent. And this all took place in March to May 2020. We made audio recordings, and we distilled thick descriptions on the basis of that. And so our co-researcher were Roshni Kolste and Tony Wallace. And Roshni, I think, is now also in the audience. Hello, Roshni. So can I have the next? So we can look at the findings at several levels. One of the levels is looking at the emotions that the COVID and the measures rose. There were varying degrees of sadness of not being able to see their loved ones, anxiety about the threats of being infected and of the person with dementia being infected, a lot of stress. This anxiety about a possible deterioration of the person with dementia, but also of the person dying, because in that case they could not have a proper goodbye, and they could also not have a proper Islamic farewell either, for those who with an Islamic background. The migrant caregivers also felt themselves powerless because they were no longer able to really provide care, and they felt that they could not really collaborate and offer the care that they would normally do. Everything now depended on the professionals. There also was a lot of information stress, as we all probably have experienced. In the first few months, there was so little we knew, and every day there were new things to learn, a lot of information. I mean, and also should mention the hygiene stress that added to the already the caregiving burden of people. People started cleaning doorknobs, light switches, the groceries, and all this all day, almost all day, because they didn't know how hygienic they should be. At the same time, there was persistence and resilience. People tried and made effort to keep sane. Can I have the next one? There was certainly also benefits. There was more use of communication technology. Some of the relationships between the informal network members strengthened because they were all experienced this feeling of shared stress, of shared crisis. There was an impulse to resilience, to creativity, and there was also more awareness of the personal care role that they had in this all care network position. And the next, please. So looking more in depth at we found 3 themes. The first one concerns the quality of life of the relative with dementia versus the health threat. So that really reflects a dilemma that they were facing. They had to, the caregivers had to deal with this 24 hours a day. There was also digital care as I suggested just earlier. At the same time, there was a lot of use of everyday communication, but not for everybody. And it didn't always work for everybody. The person with dementia was often sort of upset by looking at the caregiver, family members on a tablet. At the same time, new technologies such as a very clever medication device, which actually halted because of the crisis, because there was nobody to implement it due to the measures. And the third theme concerns the disrupted care networks and the care infrastructure. And this is actually the one that most impressed us as researchers. We found that because the family carers were blocked, the whole infrastructure of care, so the network, including both the professional and the family carers, actually collapsed. And this had been built, this network, this infrastructure had been built over the years. It had also been, for some members, it had been fought for. It had been a struggle of establishing this network, and it all collapsed just within a week almost. Now, after some time, after the easing of the social isolation measures, after the first wave, there was some sort of more of a balance, but this balance remained vulnerable. Can I have the last? Oh, no, it's not the last. It's a case description, and we compiled this from several respondents in our group. I won't go through it because of the time, but you may read it afterwards. Maybe stick to the quote down below. So every time these rules and that mistrust, that struggle, customized care is no longer possible. My sister and I lessen the burden of staff, but we don't get the opportunity. All those years of collaboration are thrown away in a week's time at the expense of my mother. So this is a case where, well, in the experience of the caregiver, the quality of care is actually going down. And the migrant element in this, the intercultural element in this, is that now appeared in this crisis that the culture sensitive aspect of quality of care was actually dependent very much on the family carer. So when the family carer was no longer there in the nursing home or in the home of the older person in the community, then the culture sensitivity sort of evaporated because there was nobody there to speak the language or to know the history of this particular person. So can I have the next one? So in conclusion, we see that the experiences of COVID and of the COVID measures are much entwined. And we reckon that some of the COVID stress can be avoided by better communication and especially a better collaboration between family carers and professional carers. Some family carers feel that their care contribution is denied and that culture-sensitive care was lost. So the continuity of collaboration in networks of formal and informal care deserves more time, more attention. And if we start to discuss new rules and new measures, we reckon that it would be wise to use the expertise and the creativity of the family carers. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Carolien, for a great presentation and for making the point that we need to care for networks of carers, not just individuals, and that people live as individuals within a complex node of networks, a complex network of nodes, and each of those need to be looked after during pandemics and other complicated situations. We'll move on now to Nicola Cooper, who's a service designer and the digital lead at Alzheimer Scotland. Here, her work focuses on people living with dementia, family carers, and the evolution of care services. And she'll be speaking about how Alzheimer Scotland has transformed their care services and care approaches through the use of technology during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is a pre-recorded presentation, so if I could invite the moderator to start the video, and I'll hand over to you.
I'm Nicola Cooper. I'm a service designer and the digital lead with Alzheimer Scotland. My work focuses on people living with dementia, family carers, and the evolution of care services. It's good to join you on this session on COVID and dementia. I will be talking about how Alzheimer Scotland has continued to support people living with dementia and family carers with remote care approaches using technology. We've been living with COVID for less than a year, but what a challenging year it's been. We've been through the first wave response, and we may now be in the recovery stage and looking for ways to build our resilience so that we feel prepared for whatever is to come. Going back to March, when Scotland went into lockdown, Alzheimer Scotland's challenge was to find new ways to stay connected to service users and, crucially at this time, provide continuity of support. Our small digital team had been working to a roadmap being delivered over a 3-year period, so we had a plan. But the 3 years became 3 months as everyone turned to us to move from face-to-face to digital support. The barriers that we'd experienced previously around digital literacy and connectivity had been dissolved by the sudden urgent need to support service users, not in our centres, but in their own homes. Our approach was closely aligned to national strategic directives advancing resilience within vulnerable populations and mitigating digital exclusion through the provision of equipment and mentoring in the No One Left Behind initiative, supported by Connected Scotland and AbilityNet, and these partnerships have helped to get people living with dementia online and using technology in a meaningful way. We worked with 200 staff in our localities team to build digital competency and support the new distributed working they were all doing. We found that digital literacy levels varied greatly, and while some quickly became champions, others have found it much more of a challenge. We now use the NHS approved Near Me video platform, GoTo and Microsoft Teams to deliver one-to-one support and a range of therapeutic group activities, including cafes where you bring your own tea and biscuits, choirs and ceilidhs, baking, yoga and Tai Chi, many more. Our teams are now able to extend their support to people living with dementia and their families beyond their local boundaries, and service users are enjoying access to a wider and growing range of activities. So previously, where you may have attended a group local to you, now you can join a group anywhere in Scotland. When we polled staff, the vast majority said they would continue to use remote platforms when things return to normal, and would consider it useful for people who found it difficult to get to a resource centre or who may not have had services near them. In a few short weeks, we have transformed our care approaches through the use of technology, experiencing a paradigm shift in how we deliver services. There's lots of laughter from people enjoying our online activities, and we are heartened by the levels of engagement we have. But we also know of people who are struggling more and more as the uncertainties of the situation go on. Moving into the recovery phase, we are supporting families more and more to use technology to stay connected and in touch, and for reassurance when they can't be with them. Prior to COVID, we were leading on a Scottish Government funded technology-enabled care project. The aim of this was to understand how technology could be used to support people living with dementia to stay independent at home and to avoid preventable hospital admissions. We worked with 30 families where one person had a diagnosis of dementia to prescribe a personalised technology bundle supporting identified outcomes. Interestingly, even prior to the COVID-19 outbreak, the greatest self-assessed need was to be able to stay connected and safe, and we identified technology, including voice-based assistance, that fulfilled this function, enabling families to stay in touch and check in with loved ones remotely. Now, more than ever, families are looking to technology to help, and many are struggling to make informed decisions because of the lack of trusted information available. People want to feel prepared for whatever's ahead. Some may have a recent diagnosis or have experienced a change in their situation. Others may be at the point of crisis. Our case study showed that there's a role for personalised technology solutions in all these scenarios. We took the learning from our case studies and insights from people with lived experience and created a free online service for people living with dementia in Scotland. It was developed as part of a government-supported CivTech challenge, and we worked with a small Scottish tech startup company called Mercè Health. The service launched a few weeks ago and it's called ADAM, which stands for About Digital and Me. We wanted to humanise the experience of finding and using technology. ADAM has been co-designed with people with lived experience of dementia and is like a trusted friend who will get to know you and what's important to you before suggesting technology for you to consider. ADAM finds the technology you need, and all the products have been tried and tested by people living with experience of dementia. We don't sell anything through this site, but all the products are available from online retailers or on the high street. You can browse the catalogue of products, and if you go to get your recommendations, ADAM will ask questions to get to know you and what you'd like to achieve. You can try ADAM by going to meetadam.co.uk. We're continuing to develop the service, and comments are welcome and can be made on the site where you will find a survey. We plan to extend ADAM beyond Scotland into other cohorts wider than dementia. So we learned how to humanise our response, we personalised our recovery, supported resilience and self-management, and we want to be there even when we can't be there. And just to give you a little preview of our latest digital innovation, this is our virtual resource centre. It's a simulated environment where you can be in touch with Alzheimer Scotland at any time of any day. It's an online resource and it offers all of our services in one place. You can speak to Fiona, who's our receptionist. She's an avatar who speaks 25 different languages, and she can show you through to the TV room where you can watch a movie. She can show you through to the library where you can get information and resources, or you can be directed through to a group activity where you can meet with other friends or perhaps family on the other side of the world. We think this is going to be a tremendous resource to people who are isolated at home and in an ongoing way to support our work and to give added value to what Alzheimer Scotland does. And we hope it's a very friendly, personalised response. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola, for showing us how Alzheimer Scotland has used digital innovation to make sure that you can stay connected to people with dementia and their caregivers. We're moving on now to Bernadette Rock, who works with Alzheimer Society of Ireland. There she is the Policy and Research Manager, and at Alzheimer Society of Ireland she has developed and is implementing their research strategy, and this includes a component of research funding. So welcome, Bernadette. This is also a video recording, so I'll ask the moderator to set the video going and we'll take all the questions after this video.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you're tuning in from. My name is Bernadette Rock, and I am Policy and Research Manager at the Alzheimer Society of Ireland. And I'm delighted to have this opportunity to present to you about psychosocial supports that we have made available to people with dementia and their carers during COVID-19. I'm going to share, first of all, with you my presentation. Now, as I'm sure you all know, and it's been probably been quite a similar experience for all of you, the COVID-19 pandemic has had an enormous impact and influence on all aspects of society. And it particularly poses a significant risk for people with dementia and their carers. In Ireland, there are an estimated 64,000 people who live with dementia, and 63% of those live in the community. The care delivered by those who take care of them at home, it accounts for 48% of overall costs of dementia in Ireland. So even before COVID-19, thousands of people with dementia in Ireland were experiencing immense difficulties accessing appropriate dementia services, while carers were struggling with, burnout, health challenges and stress. Caring in Ireland is associated with poor health outcomes for the family caregiver. And the prevalence of clinical depression for family caregivers of persons with dementia is noted to be 3 times the Irish average. So the outbreak of COVID-19 in Ireland forced the Alzheimer Society of Ireland to close 48 of its daycare centres and to suspend vital services, such as social clubs, Alzheimer cafes, support groups. And the Alzheimer Society of Ireland is the largest provider of dementia-specific services in the community. So in April 2020, and that was the aftermath of the cessation of dementia services, the Alzheimer Society of Ireland carried out research with 150 carers and people with a diagnosis of dementia to understand the challenges and the concerns they faced. We also included the views of community champions from the Understand Together initiative, and also data from ASI's national helpline, specifically from callers to the helpline, and also from the Alzheimer Society of Ireland's Dementia Advisor Service. So in this initial survey, challenges included things like anxiety and fear among carers and people with dementia. We also saw that social isolation and loneliness were pervasive, and this was just at the outset of COVID-19, really, immediately after services had closed. So even already people were experiencing immense stress and social isolation. And we were also seeing that carers were talking about a deterioration in the symptoms of people with dementia, and an increase in responsive behaviour such as agitation, wandering, apathy, boredom, a lack of routine. And carers were also very stressed about a lack of support and how they would cope while services were closed. And you'll see those were the main challenges there that we identified in research. So subsequently, we followed up with carers again in June, which was approximately 8 weeks later. And we wanted to understand how they had been coping as services remained closed. What had life been like for them? What were their challenges and what were they struggling with? And the findings from this research was really instrumental in developing and informing a new suite of services that could support people during COVID-19. So during the follow-up research 8 weeks later, we saw that the challenges were really increasing among carers and those with dementia. So 77% of carers said that their workload had increased. And they used terms like devastating, torturous, exhausting, depressing, incredibly stressful to describe their experiences. We also saw that 86% of carers expressed a decline in the person for whom they were caring. So they talked about the person becoming increasingly withdrawn, disconnected, anxious, frail. Mobility issues also came up. And 51% of carers reported an increase in responsive behaviour in the person with dementia. So they mentioned things like anxiety, insomnia, paranoia, aggression, and hallucinations. We also noted in the research a decline in the mental health, both of those with dementia, who described themselves as feeling lonely, isolated, trapped and confined. And family carers were also concerned about their own health too. They talked about having no time off, experiencing immense stress, depression, loneliness, and feelings of abandonment. Many felt that they had become invisible during this crisis and that they had been abandoned or forgotten. So as time went by, we saw that the decline in the health of the carer and the person with dementia seemed to become a lot more notable and marked. So in response to this then, the Alzheimer Society of Ireland, we developed a new suite of dementia services, and we really drew on the research findings to develop these services. And these new services include an online care support group, which is a dedicated online space for family carers to provide, information and resources and guidance, and to talk openly to other carers. We also set up a dementia nurse one-to-one service. So this is a callback service where a nurse phones back the family carer and provides very specific advice. Alternative activity therapy. So this consists of social engagement calls or phone calls that use a very particular sort of script, and they're very much aimed at the carer. They would take place on a weekly basis, and also activity packs. So these were packs sent via the postal service, and these were aimed at the person with dementia, and they contain a range of activities such as music, crosswords, puzzles, colouring, and it's really just to keep engaged with the person and also with the carer. We also set up virtual Alzheimer cafes, so our Alzheimer cafes went online. And then in-home respite. So where clients could no longer attend daycare, home care workers called to their homes and provided and continue to provide very personalised support. So I'm going to look at our evaluation of one of those services. That's the third one you'll see there, the alternative activity therapy. So that's the social calls and the activity packs. And this service you'll see there, it's aimed at people with dementia and carers who availed of daycare prior to COVID-19. It provides social calls, phone calls, and activity packs via post. So this service commenced in mid-May and was evaluated at baseline, week 6 and week 12. And you'll see there the aims of it. The aim of this service, there were really two services here, the social calls and the activity packs. And it's to engage with the client and family carer, either through social engagement calls or a variety of activities which are stimulating and varied to maintain well-being. And the objective of this evaluation was to understand the extent to which these supports have been effective in meeting the needs and maintaining the well-being of people with dementia and carers during COVID-19. So we gathered baseline data from 142 client respondents, including carers and people with dementia. 95% of those respondents were carers and 5% were people with dementia. 42% of the respondents identified as spouses or partners of the person with dementia, while 55% were either sons or daughters. The majority of respondents were aged between 49 and 59. You see the different age groups there. 23% were aged between 65 and 75. So we followed up with this group again at 6 weeks and also at 12 weeks to understand how they were experiencing this service and the sort of benefits it provided for them. Now, we're still trying to understand, we're still trying to get a good understanding of that and, you know, the particular outcomes. But what we do know so far is that the role of ASI staff in providing support to carers and people with dementia in the absence of the usual services like daycare is really paramount. And clients really experience this as very critical and essential. The staff providing this new service already had rapport and trust with the clients. And this was really crucial because it helped to maintain that supportive relationship. And clients felt that they could trust this new service. So this service had a very important role to play during COVID-19 in terms of maintaining a link and connections with carers and people with dementia. And it really continued to provide support and reassurance while the usual services were not in place. And that really came out very clearly from that evaluation, that carers and people with dementia felt very supported from the phone calls and the activity packs, and there was a sense of reassurance that was really important to them. So the services played a really vital part in ensuring that clients continued to feel supported, and they felt that there was someone there that they could talk to. It was a way of managing the boredom or the anxiety or the loneliness. So very important in that sense. And emotional support really seems to be one of the key benefits of these services. Another support that was identified by respondents is the information and the advice that this service provides. And that was really crucial to them during this time, particularly in instances where carers felt that the person with dementia was declining or different symptoms were developing, you know, such as apathy or boredom or anxiety. So carers really felt that they had a resource that they could turn to. I suppose too, it's really important to look at the limitations of this service. So this service was being provided in lieu of the absence of usual services. And we noticed that as time passed and vital services remained closed, that the needs of people with dementia and carers really continued to grow and to accelerate. And so these services alone, these new services, the social engagement calls, the activity packs, they cannot meet the extent of these needs. There's simply not enough there to meet the growing need. And it's clear too that for some respondents, the needs of the person with dementia were simply too great in order to be appropriately met by the social engagement calls and the activity packs. It is likely that these services will be located within a broad spectrum of services that includes a variety of person-centered dementia care. So ideally, they should really be included you know, as part of a larger package or part of a larger offering, but not by themselves. And certainly many of the respondents in the surveys indicated that they would like to continue to receive the services even when the normal services resume again. In some parts of Ireland, such as the west of the country, many people experience difficulties accessing services because they live in areas that are a bit rural or remote. So it was identified that this could be, you know, perhaps a useful way of accessing difficult to reach cohorts. What really came across in the surveys, in those evaluation surveys, was that the crisis for carers and people with dementia continues to deepen as services remain closed. And many carers really are at breaking point. And this in itself presents serious concerns for the health and well-being of carers and the health and safety too of people living with dementia. So I've shared the outcomes of the surveys we carried out at the very start of COVID-19 and how people's needs have changed, and also the services we've put in place to support people and part of the outcomes of these services. So I'd really be interested in linking in with people and understanding the sort of challenges that, you know, that people are experiencing in other countries in terms of the delivery of services and how to address need during COVID-19. The landscape in terms of service delivery has really changed. It's changed dramatically. And the model of service delivery that the Alzheimer Society of Ireland is providing has certainly changed direction too. We're still not sure exactly the future direction, and that will need to be redefined and that will need to be addressed. And as we put new services in place, we are continuing to evaluate them. But we will also need to look at how these services, such as social engagement calls and activity packs, how they fit into the wider ecosystem of care. And I would be very interested in understanding your experiences of that. So please do get in touch with me about it, and you'll see my email addresses there. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bernadette, for that. It's a really impressive suite of new dementia services that the Alzheimer Society of Ireland have put together, and it's really heartening to see the positive feedback that you've managed to collect. Just having looked through the chat function, there are a lot of messages saying thank you to the speakers for fantastic presentations and asking for extra details. So I'd like to echo a lot of those comments, a load of really good, engaging and in-depth presentations from all of you. We only have a few minutes left for questions and answers, so I'd like to start with one question that was asked through the chat function that was addressed to Carolien, and the question was about your surveys and qualitative work. Were the emotions that you found expressed specific, or do you think they're specific to people with a migration background, or are they more broadly applicable?
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
I'm sorry about that. So yeah, I mean, emotions of course are universal, and I mean that's we know that caregiving for a person with dementia can be very stressful, but we also know from the literature that caring for a migrant with the dementia is even more burdensome. So yet again, we had a small group, and even within a small group, there's diversity also in emotions and how they were dealt with. What's interesting is in sort of the migrant context is that there is a history of in many migrants of a struggle to belong and a struggle to be recognized as a carer, not as a person who's always being difficult, who's always making extra demands. And that was sort of pre-COVID times. And there's some discrimination that is experienced in some ways. And I think the migrants were also very concerned because they were very much aware that their parent or partner didn't have anybody to talk to in their own language, and they didn't speak Dutch. So that's very concerning. And they also felt that this might cause even more loneliness and also more deterioration. And finally, there was also some specific things, and that I was never aware of either. For instance, the financial stress. One of our respondents told us that if her parent was to die now, they could not be transported to their native country. And for instance, the Turkish and Moroccan people have a special insurance for this. So they are insured for their bodies being transported to Turkey or Morocco and all that. But this insurance doesn't cover if the funeral is happening in the Netherlands. So that would cause them extra financial stress. So it's universal and it's specific.
I think we're losing you slightly there, Carolien, but I think we can all understand the really diverse sources of stress that are compounded by the pandemic for family carers from a migrant background. I've got a final question for the other members of the panel and the other presenters. I wonder, a common theme, I think, was the development of new technologies and new methods to reach out to people who you are aiming to reach, people with dementia and their family carers. After this pandemic is over, how much of these new ways of working do you think will be maintained? And have there been any benefits, any upsides to some of the discoveries that you've made in your care provision during the pandemic? Mercè, perhaps if you want to start.
Thank you to offer me to talk a little about how we are learning about the COVID and the telemedicine and telework, because everyone in this panel, we are to introduce this new kind way to communication with patients and families and give this support. In my point of view, because my point of view is really very restricted, because I was talking in name of memory units. I am talking about diagnosis. And from Alzheimer's Association, we are talking about relationships with the family and how to continue their support and and continues to help and improve their contact, the social contact. For us, it was very important, really was a crucial key point to keep our action to say solutions from the diagnosis. Because if we stop all our activities, people don't reach the diagnosis, and it was impossible to follow up with to know about the treatment, the benefits of the treatment, and how to help for a continuous care during the diagnosis process, from the diagnosis and far away, and really to install and to implement telemedicine in the memory clinics was a very important benefit from the patients. As you can saw in the picture about clinical trials, and the same from the memory unit, we recover 75%, 71% from the follow-up patients. And follow-up patients is to check the benefits of the treatment, to control the comorbidities, to control the adherence to the treatment, and to help the patients about other comorbidities that it's included in this process. And really, it was successful to work with our platform, include the video conference in our platforms. And the most difficult for us was to implement the neuropsychologists, because the diagnosis battery from the diagnosis take us 45 minutes. And 45 minutes, I have the patient in front of me with a new tablet and the new tool, and they have to answer my questions. And this evaluation is crucial in order to get a good phenotype diagnosis. And in 4 weeks, our neuropsychology changed all our, that is my pet. That is the COVID period. I'm sorry. That is period COVID, because I am here and my pet is following my talk.
It sounds like he's very interested in the talk. What I might do as well, no, not at all. In fact, we do have a hashtag, which is Dogs of 30 AEC. I might use this opportunity to ask Nicola the same question. So is Alzheimer Scotland going to stick to some of the new modes of contacting and interacting with your audiences of people with dementia and their carers?
I think for sure we've been what am I muted? Am I? Hello?
Yeah,
Am I here?
Yep, you're here. We can hear you.
I think I'm on a different view, maybe. Hi. Yeah, I think for sure we came to this.
Nicola, if you could maybe move a little bit closer to your microphone. It's just you're a wee bit faint. Yeah, there you go. Great,
okay.
Thanks. Yep.
I think we came to this kind of with as I mentioned before, a bit of a roadmap for how we were going to evolve our services to open them up to digital platforms. So in a sense, we were a little, slightly prepared. However, nothing could have prepared us for the acceleration. And staff, I think at this point, at the end of this year, feel they're working in a different organisation because we have literally gone from face to face to this digital world that, it's not working for everyone. We're doing all that we can, and we're working with other agencies in Scotland to help people get on board with this. But there are still people who we are not reaching, and we're really mindful of that. So we're really looking forward to getting back to face, but for sure it will be a more blended offering. So we will always do this now because there are some opportunities here for us to reach people when they can't get out in the snow. But, there'll be snow in a few months in Scotland, and people will still be able to be in touch with us. So, for lots of reasons, we will take the good of this and we will keep going with it, but we'll also enjoy getting back to face.
Great, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I think I have to call the session to a close now, but I think that leaves us on a really good, slightly positive note from the pandemic. So we've learnt a lot, and we've learnt a lot during this session, and there are things that we will carry on maintaining after the pandemic, and we'll continue to adapt to try and make everything as good as it possibly can be for people with dementia and their carers. Thank you everyone for joining us. These presentations will be made available live on the platform, and you'll be able to connect to the platform until Christmas to see them. Again, thank you very much for attending, and we look forward to welcoming you back tomorrow morning, pets included. And please do post on Twitter and engage with some of our social media. Thanks again, and have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Angela. Thank you all.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.